Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Every single day, it seems, we are seeing an unprecedented assault on our democratic order by Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And they are backed up by a Republican majority in pursuit of an agenda that is not only unconstitutional, but anti-constitutional. Congressional Republicans spent most of Wednesday in meetings with Elon Musk, practically begging the unelected billionaire to return some of their constitutionally mandated power of the purse. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, acting, frankly, like a mad king, is off starting trade wars and then undoing them and redoing them and threatening to divert any money made from tariffs into what he's calling a sovereign wealth fund, funds which can then presumably be paid out to his buddies in big business. This isn't even a fraction of the flagrant corruption we're seeing on display every day. So, understandably, lots of people look around, millions of them, I'd say, and say, where are the Democrats? What are they doing as the opposition party? The answer is not a ton. Now, part of the problem, I think, is that Democrats at the federal level just don't actually have that much power. They are minorities in both chambers of commerce. They don't run the White House, obviously, a minority on the Supreme Court. But it is also true that many elected Democrats are not exactly seizing the moment. A lot of them seem to have learned a very weird set of lessons from the defeat in 2024 and are, to my mind, kind of working backwards, trying to fight the last war instead of pivoting to the political reality of the here and now. We are here now, dealing with Donald Trump's assault on the Constitution and on the country. So it is ridiculous to think that this strategy of playing it safe is the solution to that assault. Not every act of defiance against Trump's anti-constitutional power grab needs to take into account what a swing voter in Wisconsin is going to think on Election Day in 2026 or 2028. That's a lifetime away. Leave that to political consultants and frontline House members a year from now. They got to think about that they should. A lot of this renewed frustration this week stems from the Democrats' response to Trump's joint address on Tuesday. About 4 minutes into the speech, Congressman Al Green of Texas challenged Trump's claim of a presidential mandate to gut Medicaid.
Mr. Green, take your seat. Take your seat, sir. Take your seat. Finding that members continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber.
Now, Congressman Green was ultimately forcibly removed from the chamber of the House Sergeant-at-Arms. And he was really the only Democrat who put up that kind of public fight. In response, one anonymous Democrat, who Axios described as a centrist, told the outlet what Green did was inappropriate, and he became the story, not the price of eggs. And I'm sorry, but to me, this is just completely misreading the moment we're in. This fight right now ultimately isn't really about the price of eggs. Maybe the politics of the price of eggs matter. They do. That's fine. That's right. And maybe what Congressman Green did was the right thing, and maybe it was the wrong thing. Either way, he's facing the consequences of his actions like an adult. Today, he was censured by his colleagues, including a handful of Democrats, for his protest, which, again, he broke the rules of the House. The House censured him. He stood in the well of the House to have the resolution read to him, surrounded by dozens of Democratic colleagues who sang "We shall overcome" in solidarity. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is, at least Green tried something. Now is the time for trying things. Everyone has an obligation as a citizen to defend this country's democracy, this shared project we all undertake together by any peaceful and democratic means necessary. Because Trump and the MAGA movement are organized right now, and their intentions could not be clearer. The world's richest man unilaterally controls the purse strings of the federal government. Donald Trump is referring to himself as America's king. That's not some, hysterical lib. He calls himself a king. 6 weeks in, they are flirting with prosecuting their political enemies. They have a clear vision of a presidential dictatorship. It's everyone's job to resist. And what we're seeing now is a weird attempt to rewrite the history of the first Trump administration, that the so-called resistance from back then was a failure. But it wasn't a failure. There are millions of people marching in the streets the day after Trump was inaugurated the first time. Democrats were able to organize and beat back the repeal of the Affordable Care Act not once, but twice, when Republicans had a larger House majority than they do now. That resistance helped flip the House to the Democrats in 2018. It fed into the largest popular uprising we've seen in a generation, at least in 2020, during an election year. And in that year, Democrats flipped the Senate, unseated an incumbent Republican president for the first time in nearly 30 years, and won the popular vote by 4.5 points. Somehow all of that has been rewritten as a failure, which in turn has convinced folks they just need to keep their heads down and hope they can run on egg prices in 2 years. Not only is that strategy morally wrong in my view, but more importantly for my purposes here, it's strategically bankrupt. Resistance was the right course of action in 2017. It's the right course of action now. And folks at the grassroots level understand it. We saw it when people staged their own protests outside Tesla dealerships, protests which are being organized and growing every single weekend, or when so many folks showed up to express their frustration at the Republican congressman. The head of the National Republican Congressional Committee had to tell his members to stop holding town halls. Or when a tiny government agency that is independent by law, the U.S. African Development Foundation, effectively told Elon Musk and his 20-year-olds in backpacks to go to hell and refused to let his employees of the so-called efficiency project even enter into their office space. Or, as my friend Alex Wagner is reporting, when regular folks show up to meetings with state attorneys general to strategize on how they can best push back against Elon Musk and Donald Trump's dismantling of the government.
I think the attorneys general believe that a big part of stopping this insanity is enlisting the American people. Yeah. And this is going to be a people-powered movement along with the AGs filing these lawsuits. So obviously, we will continue to file these lawsuits, continue to protect America from this out-of-control billionaire and president. But ultimately, we also have to make sure that these stories that are American stories and stories of people who are being devastated by these cuts are told so that everybody knows what's happening. And I think we learned a heck of a lot today. Yeah.
Resistance requires people to activate and coordinate and organize and to work together. The struggle to preserve American democracy is just on all of us. It would be great if professional Democratic politicians got on board, but they're not the ones who are going to lead the charge. The American people will.